Here she comes.
All right, we are now recording. So it's my pleasure to introduce you all tonight and to have you all here in this Zoom room uh, to talk to one of our legendary queens of Boston, Zola Powell. I'm Jonah Lacqua. I'm executive director of the History Project. And for those of you who don't know us, we're Boston's LGBTQ community archives. We document, preserve, and share LGBTQ history. And really, it's our pleasure to be able to do conversations like this when we all should still be at home, regardless of what Charlie Baker says, to connect with one another in a digital space, to share some stories, and to document our history. So tonight's conversation will be an interview between Zola and Mark Krohn. And so I'm going to intro Zola and Mark. They're going to take it away. I figure put some questions in the chat as you have them. I can moderate a Q&A later on. I know we have some photos to share. And we're really happy to see everyone's faces. And like I said, pets, wine, smiling faces, people cooking dinner. We're here for it. So yeah, if you want to learn more about the History Project, or if you want to donate your own story or materials or funds to help us do this work, I'm going to put a couple links in the chat. So just keep an eye out for that, and you'll be getting emails from us after tonight's event. And I think that's my whole spiel to begin. So to introduce our interviewer and interviewee, first we have Mark Krohn, who is on the History Project's board of directors. He has been, Mark has served so many roles for the History Project over the years. He's worked on our newsletter. He's written LGBTQ history for exhibits and events. He's written for Boston Spirit Magazine, the Gay and Lesbian Review, and he has conducted dozens and dozens of oral histories with community members. So Mark, tonight we'll be talking with our esteemed guest, Zola. And so Zola, for those of you who are unfamiliar, is originally from Massachusetts and was a show director for Boston's only 7 nights a week show bar, Jacque's Cabaret on Broadway. Zola also worked at every bar that was ever around in the late 80s and 90s. And Zola won the titles of Miss Gay Boston, Miss Gay New England, Miss Gay East Coast, among others. Zola moved to New York City in 2000 to pursue his dream of being a professional makeup artist for Bobbi Brown Cosmetics, which afforded him the opportunity to travel the world. Of course, Zola had to take a back seat, but you can't keep a good queen down, so she sprang back up with shows at the Monster and the Stonewall and a few others. She won her first New York title in 2013 as Ms. Fire Island. It was Ms. first, right?
Ms.
Ms happened first. We would
Ms.
Ms. Fire Island in 2013, yeah. And now she's reigning Miss Fire Island 2019-2020. Oh, and the crown.
Wow.
Zola has always served her community in any way possible, whether it's lending her talents for Trinity Place Shelter, ICNY, One Sandwich at a Time, Hearts of Gold, or any other charitable organization. You can count on her in or out of drag to be out there to make a difference with style, grace, and love. And with that, I turn it over to Zola and Mark. Thank you both so much for being here tonight.
Hi, everybody.
Thank you, Joan. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Joan.
It's truly a pleasure to speak with Edward Powell, far better known, certainly to us in this setting, as Zola. And I've gotten to know Edward and Zola through some phone conversations recently. And I wanted to just start off very quickly by saying that we offered Edward a small, modest honorarium for this appearance. And he immediately turned it back to the History Project, asking us to use that money to further collect voices from the LGBT community that are not heard often enough. And we are absolutely going to do that. And thank you very much. That's in line with all the rest of your charitable work that you've done. I appreciate it. I also want to disclose that one of the reasons why we're here tonight is because Zola contacted the History Project a number of years ago and asked us, 2 years?
Twice.
Two
different occasions.
To ask us to interview Carlotta Houston, who was, unfortunately is now deceased, was a drag performer. And we did not get back. to Zola on that, and that was really unfortunate, and I apologize again for that. And that's something that we should have done it. We didn't do it. And we are an all-volunteer organization, except now we have an executive director in Joan, but that is not to excuse anything. We should always get back. These are precious stories, and that's the whole basis of what we do, is to collect stories from our community. If we don't do it, we found it will not happen. And by we, I mean all of us in our community, not just the designated history project, but we have to collect our own history.
Or it will be told by somebody who had no idea or who wasn't even there.
That is correct. I agree with you. So I want to start out with the question that I asked you when we first spoke, which is drag can be is entertainment, and it can also be a vehicle for people in our community to speak the truth, something along the lines of a court jester talking to the king and getting to say the truth once a year kind of thing. You can say a lot of things in drag and get away with the things that you couldn't get away with if you're not in drag in front of an audience sometimes. But you said to me there was another underlying reason why you do drag, having to do with visibility.
Well, when you think of elegant, classy drag queens, and these are words, I'm not tooting my own horn, I mean a little bit, but these are words that other people have consistently said about me in and out of drag. And when you think about elegant and classy drag queens, on the list, how many Black queens are there? There's not that many that you really think of. Not saying that they're not there, but there's not that many that are you roll off the top of your tongue. RuPaul's Drag Race girls, yes, you can name many, but girls in the community, Misery, Lakia Mondale, Nina Love, there's not that many, and there's not many that have had the amount of experiences that I had in and out of drag. So I think it's important for me to say my truth and talk about my journey, my struggles, my pains, my mistakes, my successes, and have that as part of the Boston History Project. So that way other Black, Brown, Afro-Caribbean, Afro-Latino people can see me and hear my story and maybe identify or aspire to, or whatever speaks to them.
And that goes right along with we were talking about how all of the isms in society, sexism and racism, homophobia as well, transphobia, are unfortunately, just as much in our community as outside of it. Sometimes certain members of us like to believe that we don't have those problems because we've suffered from some bigotry ourselves, but we know that we do. And so you kind of surprised me by saying not only does it still exist in our community, but it's actually enhanced racism and sexism and that sort of thing.
Yeah. There's gay people who can't stand lesbians. The hell is that? You know, there's gay people who don't like Asian. Well, that's another new thing that's happening. And it's not new, but you know, it's being put into the forefront. There's so many things that you don't think gay people are in a negative way, but they are. And unfortunately, they can't help it because it's either reinforced in the home, it's reinforced by society, or it's reinforced by their circle.
So we're in an era, we hope, of learning. Certainly I am. I'm hoping to learn more and more in this era. You are originally from Massachusetts, and you kind of break what some people might think of a stereotype of a person of color who's a drag performer. You grew up not in New York or Boston, but where did you grow up?
I was born in a town called Shirley, Massachusetts. Well, let me first start off. I was born from two parents who were married to other people. So my mother and my father had an affair. And when my mother became pregnant with me and her husband found out, he moved his family. And at that time, it was my sister Terry, and I'll explain some other things in a minute. But my sister Terry and my sister Renee and my mother to Massachusetts, to Shirley, Massachusetts. I was born at the Shirley, the Fort Devens Army Hospital, which is in Shirley, Massachusetts, even though it's part of Fort Devens. And was adopted from a family at 14 months. My mother and father, oh, hold on, no, get a picture. This is my mommy and daddy, my adopted parents. If you can see that picture very well. That's my mom, it's my dad, and then my aunt and uncle, which is my father's brother, my uncle Ortez, and my aunt Inez, his wife. And I grew up in Groton, Massachusetts. And Groton is a very small town, very old, mostly known for miles and miles of apple orchards and horse stables. And we lived in a house, freestanding house, of course, that my grandmother gave to my mother when she died.
And your father was a shoe salesman, but an important part of your upbringing was that you were a caretaker because he suffered from Parkinson's disease, and you were a caretaker at a very young age.
Yes, I was and always have been a caretaker. I'm a caretaker to this day, actually. After I get out of here, I got to take all of this off and then go to my daughter's home to take care of her dog while she's in the hospital, and she'll be back out. But going back to that, I was always trained to be taking care of someone. My grandfather was an alcoholic, and when he would come home drunk and urinate on himself, I would have to help him to his bed and change his clothes and get him into bed. My father, as you saw, was a very large man. He was actually 395 pounds in that photo that I just showed you. So he was an overweight man all my life. And he had high blood pressure, he had diabetes, he had Parkinson's, he had bad circulation on his feet, so I would have to massage his feet. He constantly needed water and cookies, cakes, pies, pipe tobacco, cigarettes, and I would go to the store multiple times a day to get all of these things for him. And my mother noticed this early on and asked him flat out, and I remember this very distinctly. She said, "Why do you have Eddie do everything for you?" And he didn't miss a beat and said, "Because you have kids." And that was his take on it. So I was always doing something in the home, whether it was mowing the lawn, weeding, gardening, washing clothes, washing dishes, cleaning the house, dusting, moving. I was a very strong kid at my age, and I could help my father move furniture and things like that. I've just always done that, and that was what was required in the home.
And your parents were very strict, weren't they? Your mother especially?
Yeah. So I guess my mother got her alcoholism from her father, which was my grandfather, because she was very much a Jekyll and Hyde type of alcoholic. 1 minute very, very sweet, and then the next minute very vicious towards me and my father. But a lot of her anger was taken out on me because I was different. I had a different spirit about me. I had questions. I wanted to know why things were, or why did I have to do this, or things like that. And those were things that you either got shot down with a no, or you got hit. My father had a piece of wood about this big, and he nailed a part of his belt to it, and that's what he would whip me with. And my mother would whip me with electric cords or whatever she had in her hand at the time. My parents were very, very, very strong disciplinarians. And I think people will see that and say, oh, you were abused as a child. But you have to remember, this is the 60s and 70s. And this is a Black family raising a young Black boy. You're not going to be lazy. You're not going to be disrespectful to anybody. You're not going to steal. You're not going to lie. And you're definitely going to make something out of yourself. And you're going to get your education. And if you don't do any of those things, you're going to get beat for it. And, you know, I'm 57 now, and I've spent some time to go into myself and have psychiatry and really do some hard assessments and thinking of things. And I have to be honest, I don't fault my parents one bit. Like, how else do you raise a young Black child during that time? How do you raise a Black child now? You know, am I giving safe haven and to my parents for abusing me? I don't quite frankly know what other way they could have done it. They were successful at doing it. Whatever they did worked, you know. I think I achieved all of the things that they wanted for me to achieve. Maybe they want more for me, but I think I did a lot of things that they expected out of me.
Even your penmanship was very important to your mother, and it had to be absolutely perfect. But we'll get to that story because that plays a part in your story later on.
I have a story I don't think I told you.
Okay.
The reason why my mother was the stickler for penmanship. My mother was a nurse and constantly hated reading doctors' scripts and doctors' notes. So that's why she was very adamant that my handwriting was perfect. And she would go so far as to read my homework. If she couldn't read it, she'd rip it up and tell me to start over again.
That must be a killer. You've just finished it and just rips it up.
Oh yeah, I can't read this. You know better. You can do better than that. Write it so I can read it, or I'll beat your ass.
So you had a kind of what some people would consider in the 60s a rather, on the outside at least, a rather normal childhood. You had a suburban upbringing. You were on close to your lawn overlooked kind of a reservation, which had a recreational area. So you had lots of room to run around in.
Yeah.
And
so what's not typical for a Black kid, for a lot of Black kids, whether they're living in the country or the city, is my backyard was a quarter acre of land that we owned, which bled into the town, 2 baseball fields, a basketball court, and a tennis court. So basically that was my entire backyard. So that kind of formed my view of openness and very little physical restriction, you know.
Mm-hmm. There was an incident in high school that I wanted to definitely try to mention. You had a good friend named Juan, and you were pretty sure that you were gay yourself.
Oh no, I knew.
You knew.
That I had experiences by then.
So what happened with you and your friend Juan?
So I, along with trying to be a good student, and I wasn't a perfect student. There were things that I excelled in and things that I did not excel in. Math was definitely something I did not excel in to this day. But I'm getting better. But I was out sick from school one day, which was very rare. I never was out sick, but I was out sick and came back the next day to school. I remember this distinctly, putting my hand on the door and opening it, and just this physical energy hit me. And I'm a Pisces, and we have a little bit of psychic woo-woo stuff with us. But I knew something was weird, something wasn't right immediately. So I go into school, and the atmosphere and people are a little different. And I can't remember who told me, but someone told me that some guys broke into my locker, saw all the notes that Juan and I used to pass to each other in between classes, and they posted them on the senior bulletin board. And mind you, these notes are talking about guys in our school who we think are cute, who are sexy, or whatever we were discussing. And this is now posted for absolutely everyone to see. And Juan was furious, and he says, we're gonna go and see these motherfuckers after school. So mind you, I'm not a fighter. I'm not a fighter, but I'll beat your ass today. But back then, I wasn't a fighter. That just wasn't something I did. I was very shy. I was very much an introvert. But I kind of figured I kind of had to do this, even though I just didn't want to do it. And I was praying to God that I didn't have to do it, but I went. And we went after school. It was me, Juan, and might have been my friend Tanya, and might have been my friend Lisa too. And we went, and the guys were playing basketball, and nothing happened.
And didn't
after that,
didn't Juan say, anybody who wants a piece of us, meet us?
Yes. And we went there, and no one did anything. And the interesting thing about it was nothing else really was said after that. So I don't know if the fact that we stood up for ourselves, me reluctantly, but we stood up for ourselves, made the difference with people just kind of like letting it go. But yeah, it was never brought up again.
Now it was a tough childhood in the sense that you were a caretaker, you were a student, you were also gay. And were you the only Black student in your school, or one of the few?
I was from kindergarten to 7th grade. I was the only Black kid pretty much in the school system. There wasn't that many Black families.
Wow.
In Groton, Massachusetts. So
Yeah.
most of the people that I hung out with were all white or Latino, and a couple of Asian. And what's my thought?
Yeah.
I'm sorry about that.
No.
So I was the only Black kid. The only Black people that I really hung out with were older Black people that my parents knew. We would go visit the Wilsons and the Hamiltons.
And when your mother would go shopping for you for school, you'd go to a thrift shop, and her aesthetic was, as you said, of a slightly different era. What would you do to change that?
So my school clothes every school year came from Salvation Army. I didn't always, every once in a while I would get something new, but most mainly we go to Salvation Army, and that's where my school clothes would come from. And I'd be wearing houndstooth and herringbone, and just, it was bad. You know what I mean? It definitely wasn't anything anyone else was wearing, but it wasn't good. So, and this went literally all my time through school. Even when I was 18 years old, my mother still approved of my clothing. I didn't have the freedom to choose. I was in her house. I had to do what she said. It's not a fashion show. You're going to school to learn. That was the famous quote. So, I'm starting to get older, and I'm starting to get a little bolder. So I would throw in a bag clothes that I wanted to wear, toss it out the window. Every morning, my mom would wave to me goodbye in the window. bye, Mom. You know, walk, double back, grab the bag, run to the bus stop or walk to school. A lot of times I walk to school and change in the bathroom at school.
So it's not too hard to imagine that you had made a pact with yourself that when you turned 18, you were going to join the Air Force.
Yes.
And you went to the recruitment office in Tremont Street in Boston?
I'm gonna back you up. There's one story that I might not have told you that kind of is interesting in relation to the clothing thing.
Yeah.
So we had a dog named Benji. He was my dog growing up through most of my middle school years. And then we got another dog that I never asked for, you know, and here's this other dog. I don't want another dog. I like the dog I got, you know, and also that means more work for me because no one else is taking care of the dog. I'm taking care of the dog. So now I got to take care of two dogs. Wasn't quite happy about that. So one day I'm walking both dogs and the new dog broke free from my grasp, ran across the street and got hit by a car.
Oh.
I carried the dead dog in my arms, crying to my mother, and she blames me. And I said, I'm done. I'm 18. In my head, I'm 18 years old now. She always said, when you turn 18, you can do what you want. And I left home and I lived with my friend and her family, her mother, her sister, and her brother. It was the four of us. And I got myself a job and walked into school with brand new clothes on, and people had no idea who I was because my clothes were completely different. I had a members only jacket back in the day. I had one of those. Yeah. So, yeah.
And there was a family friend who was a member of the Air Force. Is that why you were thinking Air Force?
Andre Hamilton. Yep. He was in the Air Force, and I saw his picture, and he just looked handsome and fantastic in his uniform. And I said, you know what? I think that's what I want to do. Air Force sounds good for me. And I've been saying that since I was 13 years old. So my parents weren't necessarily surprised that I ended up being in the Air Force, but I think maybe they just didn't maybe take me seriously because I had said I wanted to be so many things. I wanted to be an astronaut, I wanted to be a doctor.
Mm-hmm. So then at some point you find yourself after signing up on a bus to San Antonio, Texas from Boston.
San Antonio, Texas, honey. My very first adventure in my life. And it was exciting, it was scary, it was fun, it was new. It was something I'd never ever experienced before in my entire life. We as a family never really traveled, maybe a couple of places around Massachusetts, but other than that, we never went on a plane or on a bus or on a train anywhere. So it was all new for me.
And you get there, and this seems to begin a pattern, not really begin, but maybe continue a pattern where you immediately are being given a position of responsibility. And I had to look up the term house mouse, but I have looked it up now. Can you describe what happened when you got there and why you were hired as house mouse?
Okay, well, two things happened to me when I got there. We got in there, we got to San Antonio, Texas later than we usually should have been. And we were allowed to sleep in, which was something very nice that they did. Tech Sergeant Wise and the other sergeant, which I can't remember his name, allowed us to sleep in. But because I didn't quite understand how everything worked, we went immediately out to do our calisthenics and all that stuff, and I had to go to the bathroom. But Tech Sergeant Wise was so friggin' mean. Like, she swore like worse than any woman I had ever heard in my entire life. So I was petrified of her. So I didn't dare ask her to raise my hand, and I ended up peeing my pants. Literally peeing my pants. First day there. So later that day, you are required, everyone who enters the Air Force, you're required to address an envelope where a letter from the Air Force saying, thank you for the sacrifice of sending your child to the Air Force. They arrived here safely. We thank you, blah, 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 blah. So I wrote my envelope. Everyone wrote their envelope, passed it up the front. Tech Sergeant Wise is going through them. She sees mine and she says, who's Airman Powell? I raise my hand reluctantly. She says, you're the house mouse. I said, oh, okay. Never heard of it also at the time. So basically what the house mouse is the sergeant's in charge assistant. So what I would do is I would write down how many airmen came into the flight at that day, how many left because of sick leave. If they were being weighed, I have to write down the number of their weight and everything. So basically it was an administrative job within my doing everything else. But also I was kind of like the leader of the airmen in a way. So I helped to facilitate and organize the fact that we ended up being honor flight, which was the best flight in the squadron. And that gave us a special flag and special things that we were allowed to do. But that was my first, I guess, official role as a leader at such a young age after leaving home.
But you are a gay man in the military, and it's during a time when it's way before don't ask, don't tell. It's just, you're fired if you're discharged.
We will kick your gay ass out, and that's exactly what they did.
So you begin dating men. You dated a man off base, is that right?
I did. I've dated several men. Well, I had sex with several men, but I dated a man off base. Yeah.
And what happened with that?
Oh, okay. So
I mean, you don't have to tell it. You can.
No.
Okay.
I what do I have to be ashamed of for at this point? You know what I mean? It's water under the bridge. So I ended up contracting gonorrhea. My very first venereal disease. This is not uncommon for a airman, a sailor, whoever is in the military to contract gonorrhea. Unfortunately, this is part of the thing that happens. But mind you, I'm a young, naive, tender child from the sticks, basically. Not necessarily the sticks, but but not worldly in any stretch of the imagination. So I don't know what the hell is happening. I'm feeling sensations that I shouldn't be feeling and things like that. And I say, well, why don't I just go to the base doctor? I mean, I don't know anywhere else to go. I'm here on the base. There's a doctor, so I should go. So I go, and they find out, yes, it's gonorrhea, but where I had the gonorrhea kind of let them understand that maybe I was gay. You can figure that out, right? Mm-hmm. So
we have very smart people on here.
I kind of figured that. That's why I didn't want to have to get too graphic about it. But yeah, so they filed the papers and basically put me in the prisoners' barracks. That was the protocol at the time. You were to pick paper and trash off the side of the road. You were to do all the things that prisoners are supposed to do until I got discharged, and I got discharged with a general discharge. That doesn't even sound right after talking about gonorrhea.
Mm-hmm. So
I'm just saying.
I always have to catch up to you. You're much faster. So, okay. But that's really deeply painful. I mean, and humiliating, because you were in the military and now you're not, and you find yourself in Clovis, New Mexico, which is where you had moved as a airman, right? And
cattle capital of the Southwest.
So you're not in the military anymore, but you're
No.
still in Clovis, New Mexico.
Yes.
And what do you do there? What you go to?
Well, once I got kicked out, I stayed with someone off base because I didn't quite know how to go home and tell my mom. My father had died in 83. I was discharged in 84. I didn't want to face my mom because I was so embarrassed and humiliated, and I didn't want my mother to be disappointed in me, you know. And also I was afraid that she'd beat my ass, my grown ass, you know. My mom, my 5'1" mom would do that. So I decided that I would stay in New Mexico. I always knew that I liked doing hair. It was fun for me. So I enrolled in Vogue Beauty College in Clovis, New Mexico, where I learned to do nails, manicures, pedicures, eyebrow tinting, eyelash tinting, makeup, perms, everything that you would learn as a cosmetologist. But in going to school, I realized I didn't like doing hair as a job. It wasn't something that really spoke to me. And women were so particular about their hair that it just wasn't something that made me happy or gave me joy. But I did find that I had a natural talent for makeup because I recreated a Revlon ad for one of my final projects, and the teachers loved it, and it was really great. And so that's started my aspirations towards makeup.
And you stayed there for about 8 months or so and decided at some point you need to face the music back home?
Yeah, I had to face my mom. And also my mom sold the trailer that she lived in after my father died. And I also found out that my father was an amazing collector. He collected coins, he collected stamps, he collected paper money, he collected bottles. He had an amazing coin collection, probably worth, if I had to guesstimate, because he had volumes and volumes of books and the tri-folded coin books and the blue ones. I don't know if you know what those are, but anyways, wheat pennies and walking liberty half dollars and silver dollars and all kinds of stuff my father had. And he probably had a collection probably worth at least $150,000. I'm not exaggerating. And my mother sold the collection, and of course she had no idea how much it was worth because she never did all the work that I did with my father. Mind you, everything that my father did, I had to be a part of. So I knew what the collection was worth, and she never asked me. So I kind of feel like I kind of got screwed out of a bunch of money that I should have had. But anyways, I digress.
But your mother had actually mellowed a little bit by the time you got back. You kind of found an older, maybe even a kinder person than the one you'd left.
I did. She had mellowed a hell of a lot, more than I had given her credit for when she was alive. I found out when she died, I had forgotten that I had given her a drag picture of me as Whitney Houston, and I was amazed that she had actually kept it. But the problem with that situation was I had not forgiven her for being so mean, so hateful to me, denying me my opportunity to find out who my real parents were. She was very upset that I would even think of asking that question. And also, she used to tell me, "You're no good, you'll never be any good. That's why your mother gave you up for adoption." That's been a running commentary that I'm trying to fight against constantly. Not so much anymore, but it does come up every once in a great while. But that was for the first parts of my manhood. That was the thing that I was running. And also the thing that kind of made me, not necessarily made me, but the reason why I would beat up on myself, abuse drugs, abuse alcohol, abuse sex.
What year did you move back to Boston? Because I want to mention a quote that you gave me. What do you know approximately?
Approximately around 86, 87, around that
Okay.
time.
Because you said, you know, Mark, Boston was fabulous then. Tell me what you mean by that.
Oh my God. Boston was so amazing. I sent you a list of clubs that used to be around. There was Buddies, there was Sporters, there was 1270, there was the Ramrod, there was the Eagle, there was Fritz,
Doc's Place.
Doc's Place, which was part of the Batcave East, which was an alternative club where Aaron worked and Vanessa Cummings and Steve St. John worked at the door, and that was Michael Mamone and Bear were the owners of that, and that moved to several different venues, but it was the same, and it was just an amazing place. Fantasies in Ipswich, Randolph
Chaps,
Country Club,
Randolph Country,
the Rocco's Tall Pines Inn,
Randolph Country Club, France
yeah,
Place.
yeah, Franz and Lynn that had Bambi Baxter, Bambi Powers, and Tisha Sterling who worked there. Shauna Dixon, I worked. There's so many people, and you know, back and when I first started going to Jacques, there was a core group of performers, older performers. There was Rusty Franklin, Ronnie Evans, Leanna Harlow, Wanda Mason, and then there were other Black performers, Campy Dior, Yvonne Dior, Leslie Avery was working in Connecticut and also in Boston around that time.
Toby Marsh and
Toby Marsh,
Nikki St. James.
and Nikki Sabetti. That was Toby Marsh, Nikki Sabetti, and Carl Huff were the original members of All That Glitters Is Not Girls. And they worked at the Green Apple and Club 82. These are these old clubs that were in the 40s, 50s, and 60s. And these dolls all used to work there, but you know, in the 60s and 70s, and more specifically in the 80s and 90s, they were still around, talking to me about their experiences, showing me wonderful pictures of Baby Martell and all these fabulous entertainers.
Verna Turbulence, and of course Sylvia Sidney.
Sylvia Sidney, the bitch of Boston, honey. And Sylvia and Carlotta absolutely hated each other. Carlotta couldn't understand what Sylvia did, and Sylvia thought Carlotta was a stuck-up bitch.
So you get back to Boston now, and you decide actually you're going to leave. You're going to come into the city. You're going to move to Boston.
That wasn't an actual decision. What happened? See, what had happened was I was working at McDonald's. 1 week at McDonald's. That's all anyone ever needs is 1 week at McDonald's. I worked there for 1 week, and I worked the fry things. And I told my mother, I'm going to Boston for the weekend. I'll see you on Monday. She says, all right, I'll see you on Monday. I went to Boston, never moved back home.
And the first bar you went to was Chaps, I think you said.
First bar I went to was Chaps. Oh, yes. First bar I went to was Chaps. And at that time, Chaps was near Christian Science.
And then, but you made your way soon enough to Jacques.
Made my way finally to Jacques. And the manager, Rita, was this old, short Italian woman. Mean as cat piss. And met Johnny Frida, Chris Torelli, and at that time, the manager was Donald Richards.
And what was it like to enter? Was it like entering a world that you felt like you fit in, or what was it like?
It was kind of like a time warp because a lot of the furniture and decor was very old. There were these old blue booths that you used to sit in. They were all around the stage, and the stage was triangular. It wasn't the shape it was now. It was actually a triangle per se, and it had a hole right in the center, and that hole lasted for many years. But it was interesting because at that time, in the front was the prostitution, and in the back was the show.
And how did you get involved in doing a show? You started going, observing?
I started going and making friends slowly with people, and made friends with Rusty Franklin and Ronnie Evans and Leanna Harlow. And I would just sometimes just be back there and just talk to them, and they were just always kind and friendly. And I, asked if I can do a guest spot every once in a while. And, I'd do a guest spot. And, my very first song I ever performed was Ain't Nothing Going On But the Rent.
I love that one. I love that.
Yes. And that is still true. Ain't nothing going on but the rent still.
So, but the thing is, you were good. Like you were good. Were you good from the beginning, or did you?
Oh God, no.
Okay.
Oh no. No. I had some type of talent, but my look was busted. Everyone thinks that, oh, I was fabulous, I was gorgeous. I used to wear liquid makeup. Liquid makeup on a boy is no bueno. No, not good at all. But you learn and grow, and you get a dress from this person, you get your jewelry from this place, and you go to Filene's basement to get whatever else you can't get. Filene's basement was the place that made so many drag careers from drag queens in Boston. Hold on, I see something. What's this?
Playland, definitely, yes.
Oh yeah. Playland, Combat Zone, yeah, all those clubs were there. I have an interesting story about Haymarket. I didn't say Haymarket. No, that's quite all right. It's okay. Trust me, there's going to be a lot left out. There's a lot. Yes. There's a lot to cover. There's a lot of road to cover here. But the interesting thing at the Haymarket is when you ordered a drink, you would say, the bartender would say, do you want a drink with matches or without matches? And with matches meant you wanted a package of Coke. And the package of Coke was put into the package matches. And you get your drink, you get your Coke, and your drink was $25 plus the cost of the drink, because that's how much the package of Coke was. And then usually what we would do is we turn right around to the bar and we do our lines right on the bar. Like that.
And so, yeah.
Okay.
So you didn't start out as being at the level that you reached, obviously winning every possible pageant there was, but you had asked me to ask you, how has drag itself changed over the years? What was the difference between people who doing drag then and now?
Back then, well, let me set up the climate for when I was working. Excuse me. So back then, remember, you had Sally Jesse Raphael, you had Jenny Jones, you had Phil Donahue, you had all of these talk shows that were bringing on female impersonators for the freak factor and to bump up their sweeps ratings. So, but then also you had some very talented people, because around that time you had Jimmy James, who was singing live and impersonating Marilyn Monroe. And that was a big draw. And then you had Jim Bailey, and you had all these other performers who were showing there was this kind of mix between the professional drag queens and then the slutty, not so pretty queens and the girls that, oh, I can't believe it's a man, or it's a man, Maury, or whatever. So that was the type of climate was around then. So there was a big interest in drag. It was kind of like a drag renaissance in the 80s and 90s, where more places wanted shows and wanted drag queens and wanted good quality drag queens. But more importantly, there was more an emphasis on female impersonation and not drag queens. So I consider myself a female impersonator. I don't necessarily consider myself a drag queen. I'll answer to the call, and that is the category that I belong in. But that's when I started out, I was a female impersonator because I impersonated Whitney Houston, Grace Jones, Janet Jackson, Angela Bassett as Tina Turner. Jim Wilson performed as Barbra Streisand. Scott Townsend performed as Cher. Titus Ulrich performed as Dana Denzel, rather, performed as Bonnie Raitt. And so Evian Waters was Madonna. So all of us around that area, a good portion of us were female impersonators impersonating characters. So that's the big difference. You now don't really have that anymore. All the girls are their own character, or maybe will impersonate for the Snatch Game on RuPaul's Drag Race, but don't really necessarily perform, other than someone like Chad Michaels or Brad Fennell, who does Reba McEntire. So there's still some of those girls who do impersonate, but that's not the main focus. Back then, the main focus was female impersonation.
And was there anything that you were doing back then that was different from what the majority of performers were doing? Did you add something different yourself?
I was a hustler, and I knew that as a Black drag queen, the only way for me to promote myself was to get my ass out there. So my job when I first started working at Jacque's was, a couple of nights a week, and that would include me in the show with Stephanie White, Colette Carlisle, Tony Rochester, Crystal Crawford, or whomever may be in the show. And then once I became show director, I worked 7 nights a week. But also I would come in at 5 or 6 o'clock in the afternoon, get into drag, go to Luxor, have a drink there. Or maybe I'd go down to Napoleon's and have a drink and be at the piano bar, and Jacque would be the bartender and I'd chat with him. Or I'd go over to Club Cafe and maybe do a show, come back and do my show, and bring a couple of people from wherever I was, so I could at least have a table that was rooting for me. And then go and do a show at Chaps on Wednesday night, or for Latino night, or Thursday night for Mocha night. Or I'd go dance on Saturday, or go dance on Sunday, do my show, and then go to Avalon or City or Metro, whatever it was called at that time, or Venus de Milo, wherever.
So there's the only way you can keep up that pace, I mean, it seems, is a little bit of help of cocaine, maybe.
Yes, honey, drugs. Yes, I had a really bad cocaine habit. It was I would do, just on the weekends alone, I would do a 1/4 ounce of cocaine. It was super easy to get. Mind you, I was prostituting also. I'd do the show, pick up a date during the show, take them home. I had the best drugs, so a lot of guys liked me, and I had a great porn collection, and they liked me even more.
I wanted to ask you something that I think some people maybe afraid to ask, but maybe you're curious about, which is, you had mentioned to me, you said, drag performers have to be bitches. And I said, why do they have to be? How did you answer that? Do you remember?
They have to be bitches because you have multiple factions trying to attack you for whatever various reasons. You have your own community, you have other drag queens, you have bar owners, and you have society at large. So if you're not tough, if you're not bitchy, if you don't know how to stand your ground, all of these people will walk all over you, beat you up, take from you, steal from you, dismiss you.
Mm-hmm. So
Yeah,
what comes off as bitchiness is really survival in many ways.
And you have to, and the thing about Boston was, well, the thing about Jacque's Cabaret, which was very interesting, was Donald had this sick obsession with pitting the girls against each other. Mind you, the first time when I became show director, our first pay for all of us that worked in the show was $25 a night.
Oh.
That was the pay we got from the club. Anything else we got in tips. I had him, once I became show director, bump it up to $33. But that, I mean, $25 is shit. $25 will bear you by a pair of lashes and lipstick. And they're expecting you to have costumes and hair and jewelry and makeup and look fabulous, but they're not trying to pay you that type of money. So yeah, it was tough. And Donald didn't make it any easier. He was a son of a bitch to work for. He was mean and ornery and just evil sometimes. But because I had a mother and father who were tough people to deal with, as long as he wasn't hitting me, this was easy.
And during this time, you met a male couple who lived in the suburbs.
Okay, so let's back up, because that's a little further back. So what ended up happening was, I had a job at the Bostonian Market as the night manager, and my day manager quit, and I was assuming that I would, from night manager, I'd become day manager, but they didn't give me the job, so I quit. I actually was living with the day manager, and so I just didn't have any income coming in. And so I finally got a job telemarketing. And my first paycheck, I go home, I go to the door, and the locks have been changed, and all my things are behind the door. And I had borrowed money from her to take a trip back to Clovis, New Mexico, and she wanted me to pay her back. And she didn't think I was going to pay her back. But mind you, I was working this telemarketing job, and actually that weekend I was supposed to start my first day working in the men's department at Filene's, not in the basement, but upstairs. And I was just pissed. I just couldn't believe that she couldn't have a conversation with me. It was just something that I had never experienced before. Someone just not even being considerate, not even caring of where I would go. So basically I was homeless on the street. And I was homeless for probably a few months. And during the daytime, I would prostitute as a male prostitute, one of the places where the male prostitutes would go on the combat zone, when the combat zone was the combat zone. And I would sleep at night. I'd sleep until probably about 6 o'clock in the morning in one of the dirty movie theaters, and then get the rest of my sleep in the public garden. So it was a tough time for me, very, very tough time. And I was always nice, was always kind, always respectful. even though I was going through tough times, and I met a couple who took a liking to me. Every time they would come in, we would talk and blah, 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 whatever, whatever. And they said, well, you seem like a nice guy and you seem like you're going through a tough time. How about you coming and being a houseboy? And I was like, okay. They're living in the street and they seemed nice enough people. I had no idea until later on that one of the partners, the younger one, had HIV. And that's where I contracted HIV.
So you were in Boston doing all of this for quite a while. It was really busy, really nonstop, putting your name out there. This is well before the internet where people have a social media brand and everything. You did it by legwork. You literally go all around the clubs, and you won pageants. You even had a cable access show at one point.
I did. That was the first kind of, I think I might have been the only Black queen at that time who had some type of show like that in that area. It was a cable access show. I met my friend, a friend of mine there, who I think she was the customer at Jacque's first, and then I finally kind of talked her into, I might want to do an interview show and interview people. I interviewed Sylvia, and I interviewed my friend Big Maureen and a couple other people in the scene back then.
Yeah. And you did play Provincetown. You played the townhouse there.
I did.
You're not the biggest fan of Provincetown that I've ever met. But... okay, but you did play it. Was it?
Yeah,
you played it for a whole summer.
I played for a whole summer. It was Big Lil, Ronnie Evans, Lakia Mondale, and myself. The name of the show was Pure Imagination, and that was at the townhouse. And we would be at the show upstairs, and then downstairs next to the townhouse would be Leah DeLaria and Georgia Ragsdale doing their show. I'm not, okay. Provincetown never warmed to me as a Black person. Mm-hmm. Now, it warmed to other people who were Black, but they didn't have my body type and they didn't do drag. It warms, it's fabulous if you're a Black guy with muscles or you're very handsome and thuggish, then yeah, that works well for you. But if you're gay and a little effeminate and wear a dress, then they're not feeling any parts of you there. So I never warmed up to Provincetown. I love it now only for the fact that my friends are there and I want to visit them. It's a beautiful place. I love, the place isn't it. It's just the people and the attitude and the cliques that I don't necessarily, they don't do anything for me.
And you've had time in Fire Island and you find it a little more tolerable there.
Totally different.
Yeah.
Totally complete opposites of each other. Same type of place in the sense of, well, different because Fire Island, there are no cars and there's cars in Provincetown. But the people are kinder, more inclusive in certain ways. We still have some ways to go. But I find that Fire Island is just so much more magical and fun for me. And I've had so many really, really great experiences there. Mm-hmm. Obviously, one being me, Miss Fire Island.
Well, you are the reigning Miss Fire Island. So
I know, the only queen to have for 2 years.
So we're coming to kind of a sad moment in your life where you're pretty ill and you've gone to the hospital and a friend of yours comes to visit you.
Yeah. So I had met someone who I thought was a really great human being, and in a lot of ways still is a great human being. Who, when I saw them on stage, I was like, I looked at them So, you know what? I could do your makeup a little better than that. And there's something about you that I really like. And we became friends, and um, this person became my drag dog. And when I was very, very sick, I had 32 T cells at the time. I was really at death's door. I couldn't breathe. Um, it was just horrible. And they came and they said, "You're going to die here if you stay here in Boston." Unfortunately, I was at the point where that was, I was, I understood that, and that was a very strong possibility that I would die here. And they said, once you sleep on my couch, you can come and live in New York and change your life, be healthier. So I was always afraid of New York. A lot of us at that time kind of had this fear of New York, and mind you, crack had ravaged New York in the 80s, so it was like this very terrifying place, and we heard all these stories about it. So I wasn't really too keen on moving immediately to New York, so I moved to Bridgeport, Connecticut, with my friend Eileen, and our friend Eileen she was a mutual friend of both of us, and kind of inched my way into New York. I was living actually in Bridgeport, Connecticut during 9/11, but I was working at Bloomingdale's. So
On 59th Street.
On 59th Street. Yeah, that was my very first job in New York City.
And so you started pretty close to the top of where the cosmetic counter would be in New York, right? Bloomingdale's is pretty good. And so how did you get started there, and how did you get into Bobbi Brown and all of that?
So originally I thought I was going to work for Trish McEvoy, and I interviewed for Trish McEvoy in Boston. And I told them that I was thinking about moving to Connecticut and possibly moving to New York. And they said, well, why don't you go to interview with Trish herself in New York City? So I went and interviewed with Trish, and the vibe I wasn't digging Trish. I wasn't digging her. The vibe, there was something that was off about it, and I really couldn't understand what it was, but I had that sense, as I always do. But because I know never to really put your eggs in one basket, I made a round of resume drop-offs at different places. And maybe 2 weeks go by, I hadn't heard anything. So I decided I'm going to make another round of resume drop-offs. And I go back to Bloomingdale's, where I had dropped my resume off once before, to check and see, did you get my resume? Are you still looking for somebody? Blah, 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 blah. So the manager, one of the people, I think it was BB, who said, "Oh, we've been looking for you. We've been trying to reach out to you." I'm like, "No, yeah, but you know what? I'll take it." What you're in luck, because the account executive is here, and you can interview with her. So when can I interview? When she's done doing what she has to do. Waiting. I said, you know what? I'm going to go around to Saks and drop off a resume, and I'll be back. So I go to Saks Fifth Avenue, drop off a resume there, come back to Bloomingdale's. She said, "Oh, the account executive is ready for you now." So at that time, what you used to do is you used to have to do makeup on somebody so they can see what you do before they hired you. So they said, "We want you to do makeup on the assistant manager." I sit down. I know nothing about Bobbi Brown Cosmetics. Never heard of her in my entire life. I knew nothing about the philosophy, nothing, literally. So I do this kind of manager's makeup. They're happy, they like it. But all the time that I'm doing the woman's makeup, there's this woman behind me watching me do the makeup. So when I finish, she comes to me and she says, "Can you do my makeup?" I said, "Ma'am, I don't work for the company. I'm just actually doing an interview. So I can't." She said, "I don't care." And she said, "I like what you did to her." So I asked them, I said, "Do you mind if I do this woman's makeup?" They said, "Go right on ahead." I did her makeup. She bought $175 worth of makeup. I got hired for the job, obviously.
Now we're getting close to when we need to leave some time for questions and from your many friends who are watching. But I didn't you also travel when you were doing this?
So what ended up happening, I worked at the counter as an associate, as a makeup artist. At that time, there was a distinction. They had makeup artists and sales associates. The makeup artists would do the makeup, pass off the sale to the sales associates, and they would close the sale. So something happened where our manager and our counter manager both quit at the same time. So there was nobody running the counter. So Bobbi, the first person, I don't know if we have time to do that. Someone's asking about saying more about firearms.
Yeah.
So the person who hired Bobbi and myself and another associate ended up doing all the counter manager and the business manager's work, going down to doing inventory, doing DVRs and blah, 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 all stuff that you guys don't really care about. But anyways, so I got a review and they ended up writing me up because I didn't make my sales go. And I'm like, but I'm not making my sales go because I'm doing all this other stuff that no one else is doing. And they said, well, sorry, we still have to write you up. I said, okay, I'll sign this. But after I sign this, I quit. But if you need a freelancer, I'm willing to work as a freelancer because I like the company and I like the philosophy. So just so happened, Bobbi came out with, I want to say Beauty Evolution was her makeup book, and she was doing a book tour in the Northeast. And just because I had started becoming a freelancer with the company, they had me at the first book tour event, which was at Bergdorf Goodman. There were 13 artists, and it was my very first time meeting Bobbi Brown ever. Did I meet her? I might have met her once. No, I think it was the first time I'm meeting her. Long story short, I was the top artist for the day. And at the end of the day, Bobbi said, I want Edward to be one of the artists. So what would happen is you'd have these women come into these events. All the artists would do the makeup. They would then take the client to Bobbi, explain what they did, and Bobbi would say if she liked it or not. If she didn't like what you did, there was a table of artists that she would send the client to fix. And that's where I was. That's where I was put because I understood the philosophy, understood what she was looking for instinctively. And basically, Bobbi never ever had a problem with anything I did, like never corrected anything. Everything that I did always was good to her throughout every time that I worked with her. So after that happened, they were putting together a beauty team. And the beauty team was her hand-picked, best of the best, all that stuff they say, makeup artists that would represent the brand and kind of be like her in different stores. So I would travel to Florida, I traveled to North Carolina, I traveled to Tennessee, or I'd be in New Jersey or Connecticut or, Freehold or wherever, and do that as a featured artist for the day. That's back in the day when they would pick you up with a limousine at your house, drop you to the store. The counter manager would take you for lunch, and then at 5 o'clock on the dot, your car would come to pick you up and take you back home. So that was the life I was leading. And then they offered me to go to Australia, New Zealand. And I couldn't even believe my good fortune with that. And I went to Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane, Adelaide, and Perth, flew from Perth back to Sydney, Australia, and then from Sydney to Auckland, Christchurch, and Wellington, New Zealand. And then after that, they sent me to London, Scotland, and Ireland. So I worked in all the stores. I worked at Harrods, Harvey Nicks, Bamberger's. I worked at all the stores in London.
So this is, you know, your life as a victory. I think that's the long and short of it.
Yeah.
Can we just end with it's 9/11, you're in New York, and a woman comes in. I mean, this is a terrible calamity that has befallen the city, but also the whole country.
Yeah.
And a woman comes in who has an appointment to get her face done.
So 9/11 was a training day for us at Bobbi Brown. We always had seasonal trainings. Bobbi Brown was a really great company and always trained us. We always had trained 4 different trainings, seasonal trainings, each part of the, well, sorry, 2 seasonal trainings, spring, summer, fall, winter. And then we had our boot camp that we go, which would be in a week intensive training. But we had a training in Times Square. The facilitator of the training had just moved to NoHo. And the training's just about to start. Our friend Juan, who worked at Luminous 59 with me, comes in and says, "Oh, a plane hit a building." And we're like, "Ah, you're so funny, Michelle." But the trainer was trying to get a hold of his boyfriend and couldn't get a hold of him, which was a very odd thing for him. So he says, "Edward, Sabrina, pack everything up. You guys go. I can't find my boyfriend. We'll see you tomorrow." So we go out, we pack everything up, go outside the hotel. This is the Marriott Marquis Hotel we were at. And it was that one of those things where there's a big jumbotron of the building on fire with billowing smoke. And, you know, this is a disaster. It's surreal, but it's happening, and it's happening like further down in the city where we're actually in. But yet there's people walking by, living their lives like nothing's ever happened. So it's like this weird moment. So then we go into the subway because the training ended, I had to go back to the counter. That was what was expected of me. So we get in the train doesn't stop, doesn't even pull out the station, said everybody out. The trains are not running. So we walk from the train at 6th Avenue, and no, sorry, 7th Avenue. And we walk towards Luminous 59th Street. Stop at the church, say some prayers. You know, it's just, nothing's really sinking in. We're not understanding the entire gravity of it, but the energy's thick. So I go, all the other stores, Saks closed their store, Bergdorf's closed their store, Barney's closed. Bloomingdale's was the only freaking store open. And they said that they kept the store open because they wanted people to have a place to stay overnight, because they weren't allowing people to take the train. You couldn't take a bus or anything. And mind you, I'm living in Connecticut, so I'm stuck in New York now. And I'm the only person at the counter. Everyone's gone. I'm the only person at the counter. This fool comes up and says, "I have an appointment." And I'm like, in my head, I'm saying, "Is this for real?" I said, "Ma'am, do you not understand what's going on?" She said, I understand, but I have an appointment. I have to sing tonight, and I have an appointment with somebody here. Why are they not here? I need my makeup done. I'm like, "But man," she said, "I need my makeup done. I'm singing tonight. Why can't you do it?" I said, "Okay." And I did her makeup. To this day, I have no idea who she is. I would love to. When I'm through stressful, traumatizing moments, I don't remember stuff. Like, there's a lot of my childhood that I don't remember because it's been so traumatizing to me. But I couldn't tell you what her name is. Couldn't tell you what she looked like. I erased her right out of my head.
Thank you and we can go, I'll give it back to Joan in a second, but I just wanted to say that I, as I mentioned to Zola before, I hope that, and I trust that somewhere, someone in the world, and it can be the world, will watch this and be inspired and know that they can make it and that they will make it, and that there's a really victorious life being laid out right in front of them. And we all have our own ways of making it, but you have done it and done it beautifully, and have had a wonderfully victorious life. And thank you for sharing it.
Thank you so much. As I said, there's so hopefully we can do it part 2, and I can go a little bit more in depth to and things. But I'm sorry to the people that I might have left out. I'm sorry that I wasn't able to talk more about Carlotta and what she means to me and what she did for me, what Donald Richards did for me, and Johnny Frieda, and of course Chris Torelli, what she did for me, and so many people that helped me in my drag career. But you got a good taste of it, but there's a whole lot more.
I can testify to that. Well, our first interview was 4 hours and 10 minutes.
Yeah, that was a
Joan.
long.
Well, thank you so much. So
One other thing I
before
would like to say,
Yep.
I want to say,
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
go ahead.
I want to say there was 3 people, there's several people I want to thank. But first of all, I want to thank you, Mark Krohn, for being an absolute gentleman and kind and patient and respectful to me. I think those are the things that people are always looking for when they're being interviewed. And you definitely personified that. Joan Lafora, thank you so much for your kindness and your help. There's somebody I'm forgetting who's also on part of
Tony Grima.
Thank you, Tony Grima. Thank you, who's on here now. Thank you, Tony. They are all 3 of them are part of the Boston History Project. I want to thank my friends Zelina Duval and Paige Monroe for this fabulous darling hair that I'm wearing, and also Zelina for the earrings, and my daughter Eliana Powell for this lovely, stunning outfit. Thank you. Okay, sorry about that.
Oh no,
Gotta get
and
those bloods in. Blood's gotta get in.
so
People
thank
get angry.
you. And I would say, I mean, we have some photos. Do you want me to show these photos, Mark? We have a couple photos to show.
Yeah, that would be great. I forgot about those. We have some photos that I snuck into the History Project and grabbed some. So if you want to throw those up, maybe Zola will know some of the names. I might know some of the names. There's one of
Let's
Zola.
see.
There's Zola kissing Bill Conrad.
Yep.
Bill Conrad worked at 1270 and Buddies and many other places.
Yep.
That's on the
me.
left. And that's Zola.
That's me. I'm there. Yep. I remember that dress. I love that dress. It was a gorgeous dress. And now I don't know who that is, and I can't remember what place this is. This might be. Oh, yeah, that's what I thought. It's Bobby's. Yep.
Oh,
that's
good.
Bobby's.
We have Brian's going to be helpful. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So I'm gonna scroll through some photos. If it reminds you of anything, let us know. Similar to Bill.
Okay. So there's all right. I can't remember who this Black queen is. I remember her, but I don't remember her name. But this other picture is Dana Denzel in the red, Marcia Moore, and Vanessa Vale.
Beautiful.
Melinda Wilson and Cheryl Lynn. Toby Marsh. I don't know who's in the pickle outfit though. Oh, the green outfit. I don't know who that is. I can't really see that well, but Toby Marsh is oh, that's Vanessa Vale. Okay, fabulous. And then of course that's Toby Marsh in the white and the red, which is a Bob Mackie, I think. That gown is. Yep, it is.
Oh wow.
Yes.
I'm in charge of the screen and I can't figure it out. All right.
Carlotta in the red. That's one of her very, very famous outfits that Hetty Jo Starr made. Hetty Jo Starr was a fabulous trans woman who made costumes, and she also made costumes in Las Vegas for the showgirls. And in the blonde is Toby Marsh.
And then we have
And both
some
of these
more.
pictures are Toby Marsh. Toby Marsh was fabulous because Toby, back in the day, in the 50s and 40s and 50s, you had to have an act, and Toby's act was stripping. She was a stripper. Carl's was singing live. Nikki Sabetti was stripping as well. Narelle Gardner, and they're both Narelle Gardner. Yeah.
I think that's the end of this set that Mark snuck out of the history project. But we have more. And here I will.
Fabulous. There's more.
Yeah.
I love more.
We don't
There
have
we
more
go.
tonight, but we
Not
have more
tonight,
at the
but we
history
have more in
project.
the archives. Yes. yes, yes.
Fantastic. So someone asked about working with Brian Landry and the Gold Dust Warframes. I never worked with Brian Landry. I did do, I think I might have performed a couple of times in his show that he had that was a talent show. But Ryan was a contemporary, you know, one of the people around there. Brian Landry, who else was doing things? Mark Dowling with the Medicine Wheel during the
Michael Dowling.
Michael Dowling, sorry, thank you very much. Was doing things and with Queen. So there was different various people, but I never really worked with Ryan, but definitely know Ryan and love him very much. He's incredibly talented.
Wonderful. And folks are saying his show is Showgirls in Provincetown.
Showgirls. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
We have a hello from Brooklyn.
Hey,
That's-
Brooklyn.
There's a lot of love in this chat. I'll have to send it to you later so you can see everyone's comments.
Thank you.
And so we're right at 8:30. If anyone has a final question or Zola, if you have a final thought to leave us with, I think it's the perfect time.
You know, one thing we didn't talk about that I really do want to talk about, and that is racism. And that was something that was very prevalent in the community, and racism and discrimination. Back in the day when I was first working at in Boston, there were drag queens who never went to the Eagle or went to Ramrod. I was one of the first Black queens to walk into Ramrod and sit down at the counter because my friend Tish bartended there. So after my show at Jacque's, I'd go in and
He worked the railroad.
and would have drinks there. So there were so many different things that were against us as queens in the community, but racism was definitely one. And I experienced my fair share of racism and have been called nigger by one of my showgirls for my show. So I think what I want to say about that is that when you see a Black queen, her story is so much more than what you think it is. And I think it's very important that you have conversations with Black queens, Black trans women, Latin queens, Latin trans women, Asian queens, Asian trans women, especially the elders who've been around for a while. They can teach you a thing or two about what life used to be like and how some things have just really never really changed that much.
Thank you so much. And that's something to keep in mind when we have these history conversations is it's still happening. We're still writing our stories as part of this LGBTQ community. And, you know, things are better in some ways and worse in other ways, and it's all still unfolding. And I think it's so important to, you know, have the opportunity for people to tell their story in their own words, in their own way, and to be able to share that. And really, it has been, I have been a fly on the wall this whole time. And it's just been my delight to hear all these stories from you. And this has just been so wonderful. Thank you so much for taking the time. And thank you so much to our audience for like hanging out with us on a Sunday night. What a way to start a
Thank
week.
you guys. Thank you all.
So thank you so much. And we will just on behalf of
Thank
the
you,
History Project
Tony.
again, thank you. And yeah, so folks, there'll be a recording of this up on our YouTube channel. Please share it. Please come
Thank
back to
you.
more of our events, and you'll be hearing from us about. We have a very busy spring coming up. So
Who are you guys
yeah.
interviewing next?
Ooh, we are doing, so we have on the agenda, we're doing an event with some immigration activists, some LGBTQ immigration activists and the Asylum Project. We have an event coming up with an author who's working on Willa Cather, so that's a little bit more historic. And then we have a storytelling event with Speak Out coming up in May. And the theme for that one is When I Knew. So it's however people want to take that. When did you know? When did you see? When did you understand who you were? So that'll be fun. And I don't know if I'm missing anything. I didn't put down my whole slate. But if you have more folks to suggest for us to interview too.
I do.
Okay, perfect. I'm happy to volunteer, Mark.
Yeah. I James Battaglia. I'm sure you have Grace Sterling Stoll, but she's definitely someone that needs to be talked to. Melinda Wilson needs to be talked to. Leslie Avery from Connecticut. Jacque Collins in Rhode Island. You know, I know it's New England, but these are very really amazing people who have done things. Also, Verna Turbulence. I mean, you got to talk to
Oh,
Verna.
absolutely. Yes.
Verna has a huge story to tell. But and also, you know, I think it's important to just even have a whole Jacque section where Johnny Frieda and Chris Torelli are talking about the club. And you know, I mean, a lot of people don't know that a lot of the gay clubs were mafia run. They were run by the mob, even in the 40s and 50s. You know, and that connection of how that all worked out. So there's a lot to tell, honey. I can't follow.
So we'll have to have you come back and be our co-interviewer. Actually, that would be a lot of fun.
That would be great.
I'm down.
But, all right. Well, thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. And
Thank you, Zola.
Thank you again,
Thank
Zola.
you both.
This has been
Thank
a
you,
delight.
everyone. Love you all. Thank you.
All right. Have a good
Thank
night.
you, everyone, for watching.
Bye.
Okay, thank you. Bye.